Hey guys, welcome back to the Vid-Bits. I'm Bray, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different type of video. This is going to be my general retrospective and just kind of talking about my experience playing Destiny throughout the years. To kind of give a little bit of background, I first started playing Destiny at 8 years old when my dad kind of described a basic rudimentary version of kind of what goes on in the Vault of Glass raid. He essentially sold me from that very dinner, and afterwards I got so very invested, almost so to the point where I was more invested than Dad was initially. Um, it was something that kind of had a monumental impact on my life personally because most major content releases for Destiny came out around my birthday, being September 4th, so certain content releases actually came out on my birthday. And a lot of my friends at the time during Destiny 1 were still super invested in the game, and I feel like the community hype was at an all-time high. But I think there were a couple things that happened along the way that kind of gave way to the struggles that would eventually befall the series. Don't get me wrong, it was not a perfect start. To start off things on a very bad foot, they immediately, 1 year before the release of Destiny 1, they called for the story to be completely gutted, rewritten, characters to be, switched around, their roles to be reversed, what have you. And this was the person who made the story initially was the lead, storyteller behind Halo. So the fact that they didn't trust him to do his job essentially and completely butcher his story by, completely rewriting things at the very last minute. It was a very rocky start from the beginning, and as someone who didn't know about a lot of the political stuff going on when it comes to the development of Destiny, I was very upset to hear that there was so much planned that ended up getting scrapped in such a short period of time. So I think that kind of brings us to the next major issue that Bungie has had throughout the development of Destiny, and that is time crunch. There has been such bad crunch when it comes to expansion releases, and you can just see it in the final product. There are so many times where you can just tell that whether it be the story, the mechanics of a strike mission or raid, you can just tell that by the time of the end release, they were not ready. They were pushing things out the door. They were, trying to get things done as fast as possible. And it's to no fault of the developer. You can definitely see that it's not the people who are making the game that are making these decisions. It's most definitely the people who are at the top controlling the financial aspect of things. And you can see at a certain point, I think it's in 2016, right before Destiny 2 comes out, the CEO of Bungie resigned, and then Pete Parsons took his place. And as we all know, Pete Parsons did nothing positive for the series or for the company at all. Ultimately, Pete Parsons just used Bungie as his personal piggy bank to buy his expensive luxury cars, which that's just bullshit, man. The fact that that was ever a thing when people were getting laid off, he was literally buying cars for himself. Like, I don't know how anyone could look at that from a respectable point of view. Like, there's no ounce of respect for somebody who does something like that. Not to mention the fact that all of the major developers and people from Halo eventually, in one way or another, moved on from the series. I think the only person left is one of the two co-founders. But the fact that they fired the person who was directly responsible for some of the best musical compositions in gaming history, not just the Destiny soundtrack, but multiple Halo soundtracks as well, that was just such a shame. I don't know how anyone can excuse firing people who are in a legacy position where they have made such a monumental impact on the series that they should be kept on and taken care of. It's just ridiculous to believe that there are people out there who defended that decision of firing them, those people, or I don't know if it was technically a firing, but they were either getting such a heavy pay cut that it wasn't worth them being there anymore, they were getting boxed out for one reason or another, or some were just directly let go. I think one of the other major changes that definitely hurt Destiny over time was changes to power structure. I don't think it helped that from Destiny 1 to 2, there have been so many different power structures that we've worked under, whether that be the light, the light system or the power system. In Destiny 1, it peaks at 400. In Destiny 2, it is changed to a power system. I think they essentially made it to, I think it was 1,000 at one point, and then they've kind of toyed with it ever since then, never really landing on a consistent figure. And you can even see that with the newest DLC that's supposed to come out. I think it's Edges of Fate, it's called, which I will likely not be purchasing because my faith in Destiny has dwindled to very little, slim to none at this point. I might check out that DLC that they have coming out in December, just because it seems to have a little bit of a different life to it. I don't think I'm gonna have the highest faith in it off the bat, but it seems to be more hack and slash kind of gameplay, which just brings me into yet another point that I think just kind of took Destiny to the wrong place when they started making everything so puzzle oriented. I have no clue why they decided that a game that is considered a looter shooter, a la Borderlands, where the whole appeal to people is kill things with fun guns and abilities and, acquire new loot and get more powerful. Where in that equation do you see people wanting a ton of puzzles? Because Destiny 2 has gone so off the deep end with puzzles. Like, I don't know a single soul who asked for that. It's to the point where, like, I saw the Edge of Fate, content breakdown, people talking about, what's going on in it, and it's just more puzzles. Less gameplay, more puzzles. And that's not what this series is known for, what has made this series fun. Boss fights and interesting loot, it has been the main selling point of this franchise since the beginning. So it just blows my mind that they believe that we want more puzzles. I think the introduction of puzzles is fine. When it's in raids, it's fine, as long as they're not overly complicated and you can't explain them to another person. Because that's the other problem. Is raids became less and less satisfying because they became so complicated to the point where if one person didn't know what they were doing and didn't execute everything perfectly, then there was going to be problems. Someone's going to mess something up, then people are going to yell at each other because things are just too complicated. And then you're back at square one. You have to go find a new team. And it's like, that is not healthy. That's not a good use of resources. I don't believe that inherently puzzles are bad, but when it's a majority of the gameplay, and now they're even moving puzzles into story missions, why does a story mission need a bunch of puzzles? Why do you need to turn into some Wisp mode, turn into a ball of light and fly around the map solving puzzles like it's fucking Mob of the Dead or some shit? Like, that's not what this is, and it's just gotten to the point where I don't think they understand what the casual or core community of the game wants anymore. They have pandered to the competitive side of things when it comes to PvP, when it comes to raid mechanics, when it comes to all of those things. Day one, it's all so catered to the competitive, to the point where they don't really take into account the fact that MMOs are built on the casual community. The competitive is definitely a part of that, but the casual community builds the large majority of the player base. And in games with PvP in particular, the player base really suffers when it's a small player pool. And Trials of Osiris is literally the definition of that. You have probably a couple thousand of the sweatiest people playing every weekend, and not really, there's no room for any sort of casual player. And as a kid, like I said earlier in the video, I started playing this game at 8. I never went to the lighthouse once. No matter how hard I tried, I never went to the lighthouse. And it was something that bugged me so bad, and it was not because I wasn't good at PvP. It was because I didn't adhere to specific metas and play with people who were also doing the same. I played with my friends, and don't get me wrong, my friends were good, but at times they didn't have the best coordination, and our back and forth communication wasn't the greatest. So sure, a bunch of energy drink fueled middle-aged men were beating our ass every time. Damn, I actually died. But the main problem being that the competitive and PvP player pools were just too small, and it only got smaller as time went on. Nobody wanted to spend any time in those playlists because they wouldn't have any fun. It was so problematic, and unfortunately, Destiny is one of those games where it's pretty hard to balance a PvP where there are so many different unique guns that have different intrinsic perks that activate differently. And then, not to mention the fact that there are also exotic armor pieces that do the same. So you're adding so many different variables into the mix and making a near impossible pool of weapons to balance. It makes it so there's just kind of fatigue, right? You're either using exactly what the game needs you to use to win, or you're using what you find enjoyable, which may put you at a disadvantage. I feel like that's a good explanation of that. On to our next point. It's also a PvP related point, at least in Destiny 1. I'd say the beginning of the end was Rise of Iron and the end game of Destiny 1. There was a very steep drop off in players at that point. I can notice because all of my friends stopped playing, my dad stopped playing. The general interest in Destiny had kind of peaked at Taken King, and unfortunately Rise of Iron didn't do a great job of bringing that many players back. And with that, Rise of Iron had some pretty bad changes to the sandbox. In PvP, the special ammo economy was completely destroyed, making it so for like the third time they had changed the way that special ammo worked. And it just got to the point where players didn't really like the pacing of PvP anymore, and it was too primary weapon focused. And Destiny 2 has had the same issues with ammo economy and PvP, and they have altered, tweaked, and changed that so many times I can't even keep track. But I feel like just the general instability of the sandbox affected many players, like myself, affected their interest in playing the game in general. And you feel like you can't ever have a gun in PvE that you like using without it being nerfed into the ground at some point because the devs felt like you beat a certain encounter too quickly, or a super that you felt like you had finally gotten used to using in PvP, and then they completely alter the way that it works, changing the way that the super itself generates, the time, whatever it may be. But when they made direct tweaks to specific supers, it made it so some were completely unusable. There was no reason to take them into a game of PvP unless you were just trying to have fun. So I feel like the devs were always trying to cater to the most competitive of their player base, and that kind of made it so more casual players, which I ended up becoming over time, were turned off. Don't get me wrong, when I was younger, when I was like 14, I was the most dedicated of Destiny players there were. But now that I'm an adult and I have actual responsibilities, you can't sink in the time to Destiny like it's a job. And it's the least rewarding it's ever been when it comes to if you do end up putting that time and effort towards it. You know, ultimately, it's gotten to the point where it's diminishing returns, and I don't know if I've titled the video by the time that I've recorded it, but I think that might make its way into the video title somehow, because I feel like over time the series definitely was diminishing returns. You know, it brought high highs, but it also came with such low lows. And I'm even talking about Destiny 1. I think people forget, myself included, that there were such large gaps in content, to the point where I was farming planetary materials to level up one specific armor piece to make it so I felt like my time was well spent. You know, and looking back on it, we were satisfied with the most minimal of content, and I almost feel like Destiny 2 now suffers from a slightly different problem. I feel like it has a lot of content, but it's empty. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of, you know, casual things to do. You know, there used to be about 8 to 10 different things you could do every week as a Destiny player, and then you'd be good. You know, you'd feel like you'd do your strikes, you'd do your, if you were a PvP player on the weekend, you'd play your Trials of Osiris, you'd do those kind of things, and then you'd be done, and it didn't feel like there was anything else to do. But now, as the years go on, it feels like there is so much to do, but so little to do at the same time, if that makes sense with Destiny 2. Like, I'll boot up the game, I'll sit on menus and scroll through menus and look at different playlists, and I will never find something that appeals to me. I will not find something that I feel like will be a valuable use of my time. And given the fact that a lot of my friends gave up on this game years ago, I feel like I'm at the point where I don't really have that drive to play anymore. You know, and it's sad to say, because I feel like this, another death. I feel like this game really did shape my childhood. Like I said, I played it from consistently from 8 to 16. For sure. That was the most consistent of my play. And then after that, I'd say I came back for occasional content releases, you know, 16 to 18. And now being 19, I feel like I pretty much don't touch the game anymore. I don't even have Destiny 2 downloaded on my console. And it really sucks that that's the position I'm in now, where I have no connection to the series. But I don't really feel like they did a lot to keep us around as players. And I feel like the quote-unquote conclusion to the Light and Dark saga felt lackluster at best. There was very little about Final Shape that made me think that Destiny was going in a positive direction yet. I don't really feel like I don't feel like it revived that drive in me. I don't feel like it brought back that it didn't stoke that fire that used to be there, where I would get excited about that next DLC. I would dream. I would be unable to sleep, you know, just in anticipation for House of Wolves, for Taken King, for Forsaken, you know? They had such a monumental impact on me, and now I find myself sighing when I see a new content release from Destiny. I find myself relieved that I'm not in that time sink anymore. As much as there are times where I do yearn for, you know, early Destiny 1 gameplay, hence why that's what I'm playing in the background of this video, I feel like we will never get back to that. I don't think that Bungie's heart's in it. I felt like, at least with Destiny 1, there was still enough of that soul left. There was still enough of that core team of people that people respected. You know, I remember getting into a lobby with one of the Bungie devs and just losing, just absolutely losing it. And who knows, it could have been someone impersonating a dev, but that moment still just still to this day makes me shiver a little bit just thinking about it. Or small things, you know, like beating Crota's End with my homies for the first time, or the last time. You know, I can still remember the last time each and every one of us logged in and went down into the pit. Like, you know, I get chills just thinking about it, because it really was, when it was great, it was so great, truly. But when it was bad, it was so bad. When the content was dry, it was so dry, 3 to 6 months sometimes. Whereas now, I feel like what they're doing is just too little too late. It's not coming from the right place. And I feel like it's proven by each and every one of their crossovers that nobody asked for. Like, don't get me wrong, Star Wars and Destiny are similar, and I'm sure Destiny is inspired by Star Wars, but I don't really know who wanted Darth Vader to be a Titan skin, or Kylo Ren to be a Hunter skin. You know, these are questions that just kind of raise other questions. Like, there have been numerous crossovers, whether that be Fortnite or, you know, I'm trying to think of some of the weirder ones. I'm just gonna, might as well just pull up on my phone a list of Destiny crossovers, because I'm sure there's some that I've forgotten at this point. Give me 1 second. Brawlhalla, Cave Story. What the fuck, really? Dark Souls. No, that's just a reference. Okay, that's fair. Heart of Praxic Fire is a reference to... Oh, and the Ghost Angel Cloak are references to Dark Souls, I guess. That's cool. That's just a reference. Halo, yep, we've had the Halo crossover. Fortnite, Fall Guys, Among Us, God of War, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us, The Witcher, Mass Effect, Ghostbusters, Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, Brawlhalla, Sea of Thieves. Holy shit. Holy shit. Like, who... Oh, and Assassin's Creed. Who was asking for these crossovers, Bungie? I would love to know, because I think the only one that logically makes any sense is Star Wars, and even that, I kind of question why. You know, like, so ultimately this video has just kind of been a comprehensive retrospective of what I think went wrong with Destiny. Don't get me wrong, there were so many decisions that went into Destiny that made it a failure ultimately. But I feel like we highlighted some of the most gleaming talking points here. I think that ultimately, if Bungie would have made certain decisions differently, we wouldn't be in this position. But I feel like ultimately we can all rest easy now knowing that Halo would not have been saved if it would have been left in the hands of Bungie. As much as so many people have been saying that for years, I think it's clear now that Halo would have been just as doomed if it were still in the hands of Bungie as 343. So, as always, it's been Brave from the Vid-Bits. Thank you guys so much for watching this rant. But until next time, peace.